I am the Director of Government and External Affairs, which means that it's my responsibility to take all of the amazing ideas our team has and get them over the finish line into effective, impactful law. Anyone can develop an idea for a law. The people who are closest to the issues on the ground are usually the people who have the best solutions. I know that's a cliche saying, but it's true. Think about, in your household or in your classroom, if someone came from the outside and was like, excuse me, you should try doing this instead, you'd probably be like, get out of here. But if it's your dishwasher that's not cleaning the dishes the whole way, or if it's your students who aren't turning in their homework on time, you're going to have the best ideas for what you've tried, what you haven't tried, what you think you need to make those processes work really well. And so that's part of what we do at DC Justice Lab is find the people who know what's happening, know how to fix it, and give them the tools they need to translate that into policy and into law. Everything starts in committee, and that is where the real meat of the policymaking process takes place. So once a bill is introduced, the chairman will refer it to a committee, and those referrals are usually based on subject matter. And occasionally you'll get referred to more than one committee, either at the same time or one after the other. So for instance, most of the bills that we work on here at DC Justice Lab are referred to the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety, because that is the committee that has jurisdiction over most of the criminal legal system in DC. And once a bill gets to committee, the chair of that committee is responsible for, if they choose to, scheduling a hearing on the bill and then scheduling a markup on the bill. And so those chairman positions are really important because the people who are in charge of committees are the ones who are deciding which bills actually get to move forward. Each committee in DC is made up of 5 council members, 1 chair, and 4 other people. So the 4 other people on the committee also have votes, but it's only the chair of the committee who decides what's on the agenda, and that's pretty powerful. In DC, our legislative cycles are 2 years long. So anything that you introduce within a 2-year council period can be moved at any point in time during that council period. So it doesn't have to happen right away. It doesn't have to happen, on a particular schedule. At any point in that 2-year period, the person who's the chair of that committee where the bill got referred can say, okay, I'm ready to take a look at this bill. And if they don't say that, then the bill just sits there and it'll die at the end of the 2-year period. But if the chairperson calls a hearing, then a notice goes out to the public and anyone can come in and testify about the bill, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, what they think the likely impact will be, whether it's actually solving a problem that they have, giving feedback on specific language, or even just saying, yes or no in general, or maybe go back to the drawing board and try again. So we have all kinds of experts there, people who are experts because of their lived experience, people who are experts because of the work that they do, people who are experts because of the research that they conduct. Really knowledgeable people from all different types of fields are brought in to testify in front of the committee. The committee takes that testimony and they use the feedback to introduce a newer version of the bill. And that is the version that gets passed in markup. So the council members will take your feedback, make changes based on feedback, and then have a vote in committee called a markup committee vote, where the 5 people on that committee will decide whether or not the new version of the bill language should go forward. At the DC Council, when a bill is introduced, the chairperson of the council refers it to at least one committee. In that committee, the committee itself has a chair too, and that chair can decide to schedule a hearing or not schedule a hearing. They can decide to move the bill or not move the bill. So if they don't act, the bill will eventually die in committee. But if the chair does decide that this bill is worth hearing, then what they can do to move it forward is to call a public hearing on the bill where witnesses come and testify, share feedback. And then after that public hearing, if they decide they still want to move forward with the bill, that's when they hold a markup meeting. And the committee will meet to hold a markup to change the language in the bill based on the feedback that they've received. And after that, if the committee markup version gets voted out of committee, meaning more people like it than don't, then that bill will move back to the committee of the whole at DC Council. The Committee of the Whole, or the COW as it is referred to here in the District of Columbia, is a catch-all committee that the chairman himself runs. So right now, the Committee of the Whole is where all of the bills end up, so that the chair of the council has the decision from there about whether to put them on the agenda for real legislative votes or not. And right now, the Committee of the Whole is also used as the Education Committee by default. So the Committee of the Whole, typically, if something has been thoroughly vetted in its first committee, then all that happens at the Committee of the Whole is the council chair puts it on the agenda, and all of the members vote to whether or not to put it up for a vote. And so it's a pretty technical, straightforward process where if the chairperson has a lot of power, because if he doesn't decide to put it on the agenda, then the bill dies. But if he does, and then the council people will vote for it to get a vote, that's how you move forward to the next step. The bill goes to the full council, which includes the same people as the Committee of the Whole and can be confusing, but is different. So the full council meets for legislative meetings. And it is only at these legislative meetings, not at the Committee of the Whole itself, that the council can vote on bills. So once you have something on the legislative agenda, the full council meets and they have a first reading, which is the first vote, and then they have a second reading at least 2 weeks later, which is the second vote, and that is where the real law is passed. In DC, there are 3 different types of bills. There are permanent bills, which is what most people think of as legislation. This is a bill that once it passed, it is the law, and it is the law forever until it is changed again. And that is the most typical type of lawmaking that we have in DC. The problem with permanent bills is that it takes a long time to get there. We talked earlier about the process from introduction to committee to vote to mayor to Congress to finally having enacted law that is effective and applicable. And so there are some cases where DC can't afford to wait that long for the full process to go into effect. And that is why we have both emergency and temporary legislation in DC. Emergency legislation is legislation that takes effect immediately and only lasts for 30 days. It can be passed on a single vote and doesn't have to be through the committee process. Temporary legislation is something that has to go through 2 votes and can be in effect for up to 120 days, but does not have to go up to Congress at all. And those can be renewed back to back until you have time to have until you have time to put permanent legislation in place. The bill at that point is considered an act, and that act is sent to the mayor for their signature. The mayor can choose to sign the act, which makes it law. They can choose to not sign the act, which also lets it become law passively, or they can choose to veto the act, which means that it does not become law and gives the council an opportunity to do a veto override vote. The DC Council has 13 members, so a simple majority, 7 of those members, is needed to pass a bill normally. And a supermajority, 9 of the 13 members are needed to override a mayoral veto. Under the Home Rule Act, Congress still has authority over our laws. And so when when an act gets the mayor's signature or passes through the veto override, that act then goes to Congress. And depending on what part of the law the act is amending, they get either 30 or 60 days to review that act. And if they don't do anything, then it becomes law at the end of that process. If they do want to do something, if they do want to, to try to prevent the act from becoming law, one of the chambers has to introduce a disapproval resolution. And then that disapproval resolution has to pass both the House and the Senate and either get the signature or no signature from the President of the United States. Once a disapproval resolution is passed, it goes to the president's desk. And at that point, it sounds a little flipped inside out, but if the president signs the disapproval resolution or fails to sign but passively lets the disapproval resolution take effect, that is when the act that council passed is voided. And so that no longer has any effective law in DC. If the president, if an act goes up and Congress passes disapproval resolutions in both houses and the president vetoes that, then you're in the same situation you would be at the DC Council, which is that Congress can override that veto. But otherwise, the veto means that the disapproval resolution will not go into effect, which means that DC's act will go into effect. Before 2023, it hadn't happened for more than 30 years. And now in 2023, there have been 3 acts sent to Congress that have had disapproval resolutions introduced. 2 of those disapproval resolutions passed both houses, and one of them was signed by the president. One of them was vetoed. So we have a situation now where we're really having to pay close attention to that part of the lawmaking process for the first time in a long time. Congress does have other ways to affect DC's laws. Congress can also approve budget allocations for DC. So in the federal appropriations bill, the Congress can say what they do or don't want DC to spend money on. And that is traditionally, over the last couple of decades, how they have exerted pressure on DC policymaking. For instance, even though DC has legal abortion, DC can't spend any of its local taxpayer dollars on supporting abortion because Congress has prohibited that through the federal appropriations bill. The same for the use of cannabis, even though the city voted on a referendum to legalize marijuana. We cannot set up a regulatory system to legally sell it here because Congress has blocked us from doing so.